I'm going to see if I can get them working. See what works, what doesn't. Take a little closer look at each of them, see what they are. I've got my trusty old 4x6 computer here. Through the magic of computers, I can go, hey! My trusty old 4x6 gateway computer, the X266, classic computer. It's got plenty of ISA slots, so I can pop them in and out quite happily at will. It's got DOS and it's got FreeBSD on it now, actually. So I want to see it once I've got these working. If I can get one of them working in FreeBSD, it's FreeBSD 2. So it's rather old. A bit like the computer, really. So it's very limited what it'll work with. What it does definitely work with is NE2000, which back in the 90s was a standard for network cards. If it wasn't NE2000, it wouldn't work with Novell NetWare, basically. So everybody back then was making NE2000 cards. So hopefully one of these will be a working NE2000 that I can use in FreeBSD. And my money is on one of these two here. I shall show you why in just a moment. Okay, so what have we got in these then? We have got 2 and 1. We've got here the ICL Ether Team 16i. This one's a rather battered example of it. The faceplate here is a bit bent up. There's quite a bit of corrosion on it and on the AUI connector here. This one's an interesting one, actually, because it's got all 3 connectors on it. It's got the RJ45, BNC, and the AUI. It's the only ones I've got that have got all 3. My aim is actually to use the BNC. I've got a small segment of my network which is 10 megabit BNC. Actually, I got on eBay just the other day a 10 megabit hub. Bring this down and show you. From MRI, which has got 8 RJ45 ports and BNC port. So that's bridging between my main network and an RJ45 segment, which is useful. So that is the network that I should be trying to get it working with. So all 5 of these have got BNCs. These 2 haven't got RJ45s, but these 3 have. So if these are the ones, one of these, the one that if one of these is the one that I end up using in this, then I will want the BNC network segment to connect it up to. So yes, that's what I'm saying. We've got the ICL Ether Team 16i. We've got what looks to be completely unbranded, but a bit of research has shown that it's the Vector M1. And it's labelled on here as E2000A-1. So my money is on this being an NE2000 clone. What this one does have is lots of jumpers on it, and what it doesn't have is any manual. So I'm going to have to work out what those jumpers are. And finally, we have a no-name brand Realtek based which is RTL 8019AS. I'm pretty sure I've used either this exact card or one very, very similar to it many times when building computers for companies back in the 90s when I had my old computer shop. We used many cards like that one. Through here look to be plug and play. So they will require special software to be able to configure them. Whether they'll then be NE2000 compatible or not, I'm not sure. I can't remember with these Realtek ones whether they are NE2000 compatible. I'm hoping it is, because that's a nice, more modern card. If we look at these in a bit more detail, I've got another camera here. There we go. Let's have a look. We've got the ether team here. And here's the other one. One thing I have noticed with this is this one here has a boot ROM, which I'm going to have to see about dumping and archiving at some point. But also on there, if you look, this one here, there is a plug-in fuse on this one, which is decidedly missing on this one. So yeah, I can just bridge that with a bit of wire just for testing. But another thing I've noticed with this one is the pins here are somewhat bent. You can see that on here. A little bit bent and battered. I might be able to get my camera scope thing working here. Is it working or has it died? I think it's died already. Oh, I've gone right at 15 frames a second now. Where are we? Let's just deactivate, activate. Okay, that should be. Oh, a very dodgy connection on it, so slightest movement and it dies. So start it. There we go. Okay, come in here. The pins. Focus. They don't actually look that bad. I can see board through them. So there's not actually any short circuits there. I could straighten them up with a bit of a fine pick or a needle, but to be honest, if they're not actually touching, I'm not going to touch them, because the act of straightening them up could snap them off. So I'm going to leave that as it is and hope that it's going to work. But yeah, as you can see, there's quite a bit of rusty nastiness on the connectors here. Ew, that's grim. So that's going to want cleaning off. Yeah, the Vector M1, this is a much more of an old school one with lots of discrete components and a WinBond Ethernet chip, two big chunky SRAM chips, lots of discrete logic. And as I say, these jumpers on here shouldn't be too hard to work out. Let's get my scope in again. And we've got one set of jumpers here, which, if I can focus on them, are labelled IRQ and have 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's easy to work out. That one I've got no problem with. It's these ones up here which are more of a problem, where we have 2 of them for IO, 3 of them for MEM, and 1 of them for ROM. Now, I'm pretty sure that the MEM and the ROM go together for the boot ROM, which is not in use. The MEM would set the base address for where the boot ROM resides in memory, and the ROM will turn it on or off. So that just leaves the 2 IO jumpers there to try and work out how they relate to the IO address of the card. Fortunately, if it is NE 2000 compatible, there's only a limited range of addresses that it can really be. So that shouldn't be too hard to try and work out. Again, this is rather rusty. It's been apparently stored in an attic for goodness knows how long. So that really needs a good clean up. Finally, we've got the more modern Realtek. Again, it's a bit rusty, but this is a newer card. It's completely plug and play. It's basically the Realtek chip and not a lot else. Magnetics. That's it really for that one. So as long as I've got the software for these here, these three, then I should be okay for configuring them. And this one, as long as I can work out the jumpers, I should be okay getting them going, if they work, of course. So, my dinner is repeating on me a bit today. Excuse me. Let's try one out, shall we? Got my good old gateway computer here. That one. Right. Screwdriver. There we go. Quite a hefty, chunky case, this one. I do love this screwdriver. I've just got it at the local hardware store, but we've got a 5-speed or 5 times gearbox on it. So the ratcheting one, you can start the screw off and just grab on here and turn. And it spins the end at 5 times the speed. Fantastic for taking computer case screws out. That's the screw. Oh. Okay, and we're in. Good old 486. The first vintage computer that I got, the first vintage PC that I got. This one, and I specifically got it because it's a DX266, which is a kind of it's pretty much the pinnacle of the 486. And yeah, they did come out with the DX4100, which is actually 2 different chips, and it's fairly random which one you end up with, because they had the DX4100, which at times can actually run slower than the DX266. The DX4100 is a clock doubled DX25. So the front side bus on that is only 25 megahertz, whereas the DX266 is a clock quadrupled. The DX266 is a clock doubled DX33. So you've got an extra boost on the front side bus on this one compared to the DX4100. But they also made a DX4100 that was actually a clock tripled DX33. So it was actually a DX399, but they labeled it as the 400. And it was pretty hit and miss which one you ended up with, actually. Anyway, what have I got here? I got my good old 486. I've got SD card in this to boot from. Let's get my... Let's make this mobile. Oh, oops. Going wrong here. I just managed to change. How's that happened? Oh, there it is. Back. There we go. Changed cameras then. Yes, I've got my SD card in here to boot from. Come on, focus. Thank you. Continuous. There we go. It's got Cirrus Logic GD5430 classic chip graphics card. DX266 is underneath that massive heatsink. Shows how far we've come with modern computers. If you used to have a heatsink like that, and now you've got a heatsink that's about the size of the case. It's an Intel motherboard in here. It's not my favourite motherboard. It's got a Phoenix BIOS in it, which has a rather serious bug in that it can't detect and work with any hard drives bigger than about 3.6 gigabytes, which is kind of annoying because I've got lots of sort of, now oops, that's one thing I need to watch out for with this is accidentally turning off my phone whilst putting the phone back into the tripod. That'll be back soon once it's rebooted. Anyway, yes, it's got a bug in the BIOS, so it won't see anything bigger than 3.6 gigabytes. If you try and use anything bigger than that, it just freezes the BIOS, which is kind of annoying. I've got plenty of sort of CF cards and SD cards that are 4 gig, which I would love to use in this, but can't. So I've got my SD card here at 2 gigabytes, which is mostly set up for BSD with a tiny, like 10 megabyte partition with DOS on it. Serves two purposes. Well, first off, it gives me DOS basically, so I've got access to the configuration utilities and things for network cards, whatever, and a convenient place for testing DOS drivers and what have you. But also there's a bug. This is full of bugs. There's a bug in this kind of SD card adapter, which you can partition your SD card to your heart's content, and everything is perfect. Then you turn your computer off, you turn your computer on again, and if the first partition on the SD card is neither a FAT 12, 16, 32, whatever, or NTFS partition, then it goes, oh, this disk is blank. And says there's nothing on it, no partitions. And yet there is. So the first partition on an SD card in one of these adapters has to be FAT 12, 16, 32 or an NTFS partition. So if you have anything that's not DOS or Windows, i.e. Linux or FreeBSD or anything, then you have to have an extra partition as the very first partition, which is a DOS partition. Okay, that should be back now, yep. Get you a better shot of the adapter so you can recognize that sort of adapter in future. Actually, it's got a chip on it, which is the... Where is it? Let's see it. Come back. It's the right way around so I can control it. That's better. Left and right is left and right now. Try and focus. Lighting is wrong for this at the moment. I can't read it. No, it's the most common cheap one that you get on Amazon, so they're everywhere. I've got loads of them. They're all in most of my computers now. I've got these adapters. Got a 3D printed bracket actually on a lot of them. I could do with making one for this at some point, but it fits then into a 3.5-inch floppy bay. Right, now I need to connect all this up. Let's switch back to odd view. Move that camera away for a moment. Okay, I've got VGA connector. Let's go this way around, I think. VGA connector. I've got power. And I'll need a keyboard. My good old Dell keyboard. It's actually one of the nicer PS2 keyboards I own, this one, because it's got quite a non-linear, I mean, it's rubber domed rubbish, but it's a non-linear, very sort of clicky action to it. So I like non-linear keyboards. My main keyboard is a Keychron with Gateron Browns in it, which is quite a nice. Go over here and I can't really hear that. It's muting it. But that's got a nice semi non-linear clicky feel to it. It's really nice to type on. So it is not quite as good as that. It's really very hard press on it to get it over the lump, but yeah, it's not a bad keyboard for a Dell, really. Okay, should really have my wrist strap on, actually, shouldn't I, for this? I'm not a fan of having a wrist strap on when working on a BNC network. Primarily because you can get quite a tingle off a BNC network, I've found in the past. It's quite a... I don't want to say it's high voltage, it's the difference... The voltage difference between the shield and ground is quite high, but the actual voltage that it operates on isn't. So you can get quite a tingle off it. And I found if I touch the BNC network with my right hand, with the strap on the right hand wrist, it tingles all around the strap, and it's quite an off-putting feeling. But I should have it on, really, for the sake of safety. Okay, where are we? Let's start off with... Let's try the Realtek, the newest one. This one, we got a date code, a 97 date code on the chips on this. 31st week of 97 there, 39th week of 46th week of 97. So this is end of 97 this was made, then beginning of 98. Okay. Right, we are in, and see if it boots up. So far, so good. A good sign that we're into DOS. Okay. I have already done a bit of downloading of drivers and made some disk images from them for the GoTech that's in this. So let's put my that way up. My USB stick into there. Okay. Where are we? We want my drivers directory and network, yeah, and RTL 8019AS. Okay, let's see what we've got here. We've got a packet driver, we've got RSET 8019. That will be the configuration program. Let's try it. Does it find the card? I'll bet it doesn't. There is no active LAN board found in your system. Okay. That's not encouraging. This is the one that I was hoping would be the more likely to work, being a newer card. Right. I wonder, is there a setting in the BIOS that I've got to turn on for plug and play cards? Advanced. We'll use that. No. Change the boot order. No, there's nothing in there, so that's looking like it's not going to work. That's a shame on that one. That's a bit of a downer to start on. These ones are 10 a penny though. But I will just copy the driver onto the hard drive. 8019. //e. Okay. Maybe the packet driver will just find it regardless, without having to do a setup on it first. Okay. So PNPPD. Found card. That doesn't look good. Ether ID 3A3A 3E3E 3E3E. That's not good. IO340 IRQ9 on 8-bit slot. It says it's on an 8-bit slot. It's not. The card is on an 8-bit slot. Please config IRQ less than 8. Found card. So it thinks it's found it, but it can't initialize it. Right. It thinks it's on an 8-bit slot. Which means that these here aren't being detected and connected. However, that's useful to know that this will work in an 8-bit slot. Let's try a different slot. See what it thinks of that, in case there's something up with that slot. Oh, you don't want to see my tea bag there. RTL8019. Let's just try set 019. Ah, it's found it in that slot. View current configuration. Operating mode jumperless, Ethernet address, media type auto detect, full duplex disabled, 345 with no boot ROM. That looks good. Actually, there was a run diagnostic. Everything's passing except the cable connection, and that's because the cable connection is here. Right. If I can connect this without getting an electric shock off it. It's only very low current, but it's a tingle that you don't really want. That's looking good. That's looking very good. Let's try. PPRV and PPD. That's detected it. Right. Can I get a DHCP release? I can. And I can ping the Google DNS server. Haha, that works. Maybe there's something slightly iffy on that plot then. Excellent. So I've got a working Realtek card there. Actually, PK, PPRA, PNP, PD minus U. That installed, yeah. And then P, R, that 8019. 340 and 5. I should make a note of that, really, shouldn't I? Yeah, let's get me Sharpie. That's on 345. I shall make a note on here. OX340 and Q5. Okay. Excellent, that's working. Next, a crusty Ether Team 16i. Very crusty. These have been abused. These are a bit older. These ones are... Find a date code on here. 93. 13th week of 93 there. So early to mid 93, I think. Which is rather crusty and yuck. I think these want to go into the ultrasonic cleaner. But for now, let's just plug one in and try it. What's the worst that can happen? In the slot. Come on, in you go. It's just that it's bent. Is it that the connectors are blocking it? Ah, I see the AUI connector is catching. Shield around the AUI connector here is catching on the base. I don't know if you can see this. Right, it's around. Got the case here is catching the edge of the AUI connector. And stopping it from going all the way in. Let's just try another slot. It does go in with a bit of manipulation. I think we're in. We're in. Excellent. Okay, now, will this explode? Nope. Powered up. Okay, let's see. I just wish it would post a bit quicker, this board. Into DOS. Okay. I need the E16i. It's copy that disk locally. We have a diag program, which I think will be the program to do configuration. 16i. Let's see what it comes up with. 2A0 IRQ10. That's an Ethernet address. It's found it. No network connection found. Adapter fault. I plug the network in. Just touched the connector then and got the tingle in my wrist strap. There we go, we're in. Once it's in, you don't get the tingle because it's grounded through the computer. Okay, let's see what it thinks now. Hey, adapter okay, works. Okay, so that's on 2A010. Let me write that on there now. 2A0 IRQ10. And have I got a packet driver? I have. TKTDRV. E16i.com. Okay, what do we need here? Packet int number will be OX60. It's found it. DHCP. Looking good. And pings. Yay, that works. That's a working board. Brilliant. Okay, while we're on these ones then, let's do the other one, which is more crusty and has the bent pins. It also lacks a fuse, so I'm going to take the fuse out of this one and put it into this one. Straighten the plate up a little. It's very thin, the plate on this. Very thin indeed. Okay. Here, if it will. There we go, we're in. I won't connect it up just yet. Looking up. Into DOS. What did I call it? E69, was it? Yeah. And this is E9. It's found the board. That's on 2A010, that one. Yeah. Plug the cable in. Looking good. That is looking good. So let's go. There's E16IOX. Okay, DHCP. And ping. Yes. 3 for 3. We have 3 working cards there. So what was that on? That was... Can I unload that? Yeah. That's on 280 IQ10. Excellent. Three. Now here comes the fun. Trying to get these ones with the unknown jumpers working. I know it's on IRQ5, but I have no idea what the IO address is going to be. So it's going to be a case of just trying it out and seeing what I can find. And then maybe making a little map of what the jumpers are. Okay, on my GoTech here, I should have any 2000. Let's get this a bit bigger, shall we? Where are we? NE2. Get that lot over. Any 2000. What do we want here? Packet interrupt number, interrupt level, IO address. Okay. So OX65. I know it's 5 because the jumper says it's 5. Okay, now we have limited number of options for this, and we are looking at 200 to 360 in steps of 20. Skipping to E. 200, 220, 240, 260, 280, 2C0, 300, 320, 340, 360. My money actually is on the range 300, 360. It could be elsewhere, but that's what because they've got 2 jumpers. then I would reckon we've got a choice of 4 possible addresses, and that would be the easier one, easier 4 to do. 300 to 360 to do decoding for. So 300 to 360. Let's try 300. First time lucky. Okay. We have IO port 300, IRQ5, an Ethernet address. Let's plug it in. Looks like we have an NE2000 card that might be working. DHCP. Looks good. Pings. Yay. Woohoo. So, good guess there on the 300. Right, so I'm going to need to make a list of these, don't I, really? What have we got at the moment? Currently, we have both of them on is 300. Okay. So on is OX300. I'm going to take one off. Take off the left-hand one first. Back in. I'm not going to bother taking the cable. That should have changed the base address now. NE2000 OX69. Nice. 5. So this should fail. Yep. But it doesn't know that it's failed because it's a bit dumb. Let's uninstall that. Let's try 320, the next in the list. There it is, 320. So, on keyboard. Off on is OX320. I think I know the pattern already. If I go this one back on and take off this one, that I think will be 340. Let's try that on 340. Then on, off, and off, off. Right. VGA capture. So is this 340? It is. Oh. Okay, and just confirm, take both off, should be 360. So we have decoded the vertex M1 IO address settings. Note down 340. I suppose my mouse gone. There it is. OX340. So I think the next one is OX360. Eventually, when it boots. $360. That should be then. Yes, perfect. Okay, so we have got this down. Both on is 300. Left hand one off is 320. Right hand one off is 340. Both off is 360. Perfect. One card left to look at. And we have on this one the left hand one off is on IQ5, so left hand off would be 320. Let's pop this one in here and see if it works. Hasn't gone bang. It should be on 320. Oops. Doesn't show anything. There we go. Video cable had fallen out. E2000 OX60 5 OX320. I said, didn't I? It's in that. Finds it. Let's put the cable on and the HCP. We have DHCP. We have ping. Haha. Would you believe it? 5 out of 5 boards work perfectly. Apart from a few bent pins and a lot of crustiness. We have got 5 working boards. Excellent. Now, my main task now is to try and get one working in BSD. So if I reboot, I may have to compile a new kernel. Although I did compile a kernel with any 2000 support in it. I have no idea what the settings are that I used, just the default settings. And whether those default settings are in the range of this card or not, I don't know. So we shall boot up. Takes a little while, of course. 486. What a slow computer. Yes, that Realtek card. I mentioned that it worked on an 8-bit socket, or it looked like it was going to work on an 8-bit socket if I adjusted the interrupt suitably. I've got, hopefully, tomorrow, I've got coming a nice new toy. I won't tell you too much about it, but it has 8-bit slots in it. And it would be nice to have a network card. Is it? Yes, this. 386 on by I have got that up in this, I think. Did I have set up? I'm sure I did. Oh no, I set it up for XL0, didn't I? I was thinking I might try and get one of my Etherlinks working in it. I don't want XL0. I need the NE2000. Is ED? I think it's going to give me the editor ad, isn't it? Let me just check. BSD NE2000. ED. Default is 280, which is outside of the range of this. The device, making a note here on the other screen, ED0, ISA question mark, port OX. The one that's in there is 320, isn't it? Net IRQ 5 IOM. I think this is for the ROM. Doesn't exist. Vector EDINTR. Okay, let's put that into my gateway configuration. Device ED0 at ISA question mark, port OX320, net IRQ 5 IOMEM E800 vector EDINTR. Config gateway. I have to recompile the entire kernel, which will take forever on this computer. It's only got 8 meg of RAM in it. I do have more memory. It's in my Cyrix 6686 at the moment now. So I could take some memory out of that and put it into here, which would then actually allow me to run a newer version of FreeBSD on it. But I like having that memory in my Cyrix computer. It runs as my normal DOS and Windows 95 computer for sort of DOS games. This one's my DOS BSD computer for experimentation. So I think it's of more value in my games computer. Cyrix 6686 games computer. It's got a wonderful ring to it, hasn't it? Yes, it's 166 megahertz, or it's called the 166 plus. So it's actually a 133, I think, megahertz. Wonderful chip, the 6686. It's released about the same time as the Pentium, with similar running speeds to the Pentium, but lacking the extra instructions the Pentium has. It so it's more like a supercharged 486 than a Pentium. Okay. Not DOS now. Make. Now this we can expect to take quite a long time. So what should we do whilst that's compiling? I think I should maybe have a bit of a clean up of one of these boards. Let's try one of these. View. Slide the computer across a bit. And have a look at this. I might bring my camera in here. A closer view. There we go. Good place. You've got it all upside down, I'm afraid. Actually, I could theoretically transform Alakazam. Oh, no, that's a very drunken angle. Bring this forwards and down a bit. To loosen that so that I can. Is that one? Yeah, it's okay. Go, turn that around there a bit. There we go, that's a bit of a better angle. That's a bit less drunken now. Okay. That's off. Right. This one is not too bad. I don't want to lose the A0 off the back of it while I'm cleaning. Oh, let's get a big brush. Some alcohol. I've pretty much run out of alcohol, unfortunately. To order a new bottle. This one is rather crusty down inside here. Let's give it a bit of a work if I can get anything out of my bottle. Let's bring it forwards. So I can get the bottle off the edge of the desk. Get a bit of this work. Crusty, yuck. Okay. RQ10 still on there. The crusty bit. Focus. Wonderful what you can do with alcohol and a toothbrush. Alcohol cures all known ills. When it comes to PCBs, that is. When it comes to life, it really doesn't. So much nicer. I don't think I can focus on this, can I? Oh, yeah. Oh, don't do that. Thank you. Yeah, there we go. It does focus. Oops. That looks so much nicer now. The RJ45 is a bit crusty too. Not too bad, but it's still very dusty in there, isn't it? Try and get a bit of alcohol in it. There we go. About as good as I can get from that. Looks pretty reasonable now. Still got the 2A0 on the back. Oh, that's good. Do nicely. That was the less crusty one. This is the more crusty. Oh yes, I want to look at dumping that as well. I don't actually have an EEPROM programmer, unfortunately. But I do have a chip kit. What's buzzing and why? Is the battery going flat in this phone? Might be. I got a recharger to hand. Sure, I should have. One. I think I need a cable for it. Find. Oh. So many cables now, all the wrong one. That's a okay. Green. Oh, this is just a power only one, isn't it? Oh, it'll have to do. It's all I've got to hand. There. Yes, battery's on 6%. I doesn't think it's charging. Oh, I know what. One over here, haven't I? Charging my mouse at the moment. There we go. That's what I need. Get that in there. That should. There we go. That's gone green now. Right, that's charging. Panic over. Right. Let's have a look at cleaning this one. This is on 2A0. Was the other 2A0? Yeah, they're both 2A0. Convenient. Come on, squirt. I desperately need to order some more alcohol. Furry. It's fur. It's mold. Is it actually growing on it, or is it some kind of corruption of the plastics? Like tin whiskers kind of thing? Whatever it is, alcohol gets rid of it. And down the end. Worse in real life than it does on camera. Horrible now, I think. Crusty bits down in there still. The corrosion down in that edge there. Nothing much I can do about that. There's no real rust on it though, thankfully. Put all the furry bits off. That'll do like that, I think. Okay, now this one here. Mainly just the plate here that is crusty and more rusty than anything. That actually I won't be able to clean that off with alcohol. That I will need some actual rust remover, I think. Let's be pitted into the metal. If I can clean some of the dust and dirt off it, so it gets a bit more shiny, but it's not getting rid of the corrosion. For that, I'm going to need some rust remover. The simplest is white vinegar. Got a whole tub of it in the garage, so that's the job I can do later. That's a little cleaner there now. It's not perfect, but it's cleaner than it was. Now, 2000 Vertex. This is the really crusty one. I mean, look at that dirt. Yuck. That's lines from the edge of the case, isn't it? Yeah. A good scrubbing. That's starting to come off. Starting to come off gradually. It's quite hefty gunk, that. Not sure how much of it is rust and how much of it is dirt. But it is gradually making an impression. Again, I think I'm going to need to take this plate off and soak it in vinegar. Get rid of the rust that's built up on it. Oh, yes. That's as clean as I can get that at the moment. It's not too bad, considering. Go. Too bad now. There. I can't do the fifth one because it's in the computer at the moment, and that's compiling. Speaking of which, how are we looking? Still going. MS-DOS FS VN op. Oh, right. Yes, I'm going to want to dump this boot ROM. Actually, rather than using an idea. Rather than using an actual EEPROM programmer, I'm sure I could just put it in the computer and read the EEPROM directly. So it'll just be sat there in the address space. And I'm sure the diag program would tell me where in the address space it is. And I can pull that off and stick it onto archive.org. Yeah, I think that's the way I'll go about that one. But I can't while the computer is compiling the PPP TTY. We're doing network stuff now anyway, so we're making some progress, certainly. Radix, raw CB, raw user rec, root. FreeBSD 2, which I'm running here, is actually one of the first versions of FreeBSD that I ever used. I started with FreeBSD. I was contracted by a friend to build a web server back in the dark days of dial-up internet. It was one of the first Pentium 2s that I've ever worked with. Built from scratch, of course, because I had a computer shop back then, building computers. So it was one of the first Pentium, one of the very early Pentium 2s, and I've been using Linux on 486s and early Pentiums, Slackware Linux it was back then. Version 1.2, I think I was on then with Slackware. And he'd contracted us to build a web server for a small ISP that he worked for. So yeah, we built this Pentium 2 system, started trying to install Linux, and it wouldn't. It would not touch it at all. I would say a bit of Googling around, but Google didn't exist then. A bit of Alta Vistaing around, and I found I wasn't the only one not able to run Linux on a Pentium 2. It just didn't work. So I thought I would investigate something that I'd read about but never actually looked at, this wonderful thing called FreeBSD, which was supposed to be like Linux but better than Linux. And fair enough. First time I installed it, FreeBSD 2 point something, it was 2.3 or 2.4 or something. Booted straight up, installed perfect first time, installed Apache, got everything working. When Linux failed, FreeBSD worked. Nowadays, it's the other way around. FreeBSD really sucks for hardware support. It may be a better kernel than Linux, it may be a better user environment than Linux, but the hardware support is still sadly lacking. If you want hardware support, you go for Linux. Linux just works. I'm not a fan really of the way the Linux kernel works and the way that the Linux user land is developing. I much prefer FreeBSDs as an operating system. But even the very newest versions of FreeBSD, it's fine for a server on the right hardware, but you certainly couldn't use it as a desktop. I've tried. There was a version of FreeBSD that came out a number of years ago called PCBSD, which was a repackaging of FreeBSD with a package manager and desktop oriented. And yes, it worked, but it wasn't really up there in the same way that Linux is. So for many, many years, FreeBSD was my Unix of choice. But never on the desktop. For desktop, I had various Sun computers, Sun workstations running Solaris, and in later, so it was Solaris was CDE originally, the common desktop environment, but then they changed after a while to what they called the Java desktop, the J word, the Java desktop, which was GNOME. Just GNOME with a purple hint to it. And they called it the Java desktop. So yeah, I used that as my desktop system for ages. I had an Ultra Spark 5, was it? I think it was quite a large, hefty tower unit with a gigantic CRT screen running Solaris with the Java desktop. Alongside PCs running Windows, of course. I mean, I was on, at the time, I think I was still on Windows 3.11 at the time. My main Windows operating system, which was tolerable. By today's standard, it's utter rubbish. But no, it's at the time it was what you had, so it was what you used. It was not bad, but it was definitely of its time. And I've got it on my Cyrix computer, and yeah, it's usable. So yes, I have Solaris and FreeBSD as my main Unix operating systems. Linux, yes, I had Linux around the place, but it was still very much in its infancy and very much considered a toy operating system still back then. And I did have one job. We did have still back in the early days of Linux, Blackware again. I had one interesting computer that I was managing. At the time, I was managing a few AIX systems, IRA6000 IBMs. But we also had one, it was an early Pentium. I can't remember what sort of spec it was, whether it was a Pentium 1 or a Pentium 2. That was running Linux, and it had an external 7-port SCSI enclosure connected to it with 7 CD-ROM drives in it. And our suppliers would provide us databases of all their products, whatever, on CDs. And the software to read the data, it was proprietary software to read the data on these databases, which all ran under DOS. But we had shops in multiple locations that all wanted to access these databases. So rather than each shop having its own copy of the database, and I mean, CD rewriting, CD writers, whatever, really weren't a thing then. I don't think even it really existed. So what we had this Linux computer with 7 CD-ROM drives, running. I remember it was DOSBox or Box BOCHS or PCEMU, one of the early PCM DOS emulator programs, which it's the beauty of open source software, I'd modified to run DOS programs off the CD-ROMs and display them on green screen serial terminals, because back then our shops all had, we had a leased line to each, from HQ to each shop, 64 kilobits leased lines, and at each site we had a serial terminal server, and then green screen serial terminals all over the points of sale and in the offices and everything, rather than computers, because it was just so much easier to manage when it's just all just dumb terminals talking to one server or 3 or 4 servers. So much easier to manage than having to deal with upgrading operating systems on remote computers. So yes, we had leased lines going to green screen terminals, and I had to modify the emulator so that it could run these DOS programs over the serial terminals on remote locations. So we had one Linux computer doing all these databases off all these CD-ROMs to all these users throughout the whole company. It was quite an interesting little computer that I had built up there. Yeah, how are we looking on here? NFS, VNOps, or NFS stuff now. It would be nice to get networking going on BSD on here. And I have had networking running on DOS and Windows on this machine before, quite happily. And I have run Linux on this. Slackware 767, I think, was the newest version that was possible to run on this, but I needed more memory in it for that. And I have had networking running on this with, I've got a few 3Com, Etherlink, XL 3s, whatever they are, 3C905B PCI cards. But they're in use in other computers at the moment, so I wanted an ISA one in this. And I'm not sure that I can actually get the PCI cards working in BSD on this because it's such an old version of BSD. But it's the newest version that I could run with only 8 megs of RAM. So I decided that ISA cards were definitely the way to go for this. Try and get a hold of a good old NE2000 compatible, because that will work on anything old. It's the standard from back then. NE2000 is all there was. There were others, obviously. 3Com had their own ISA cards and what have you, but NE2000 was the de facto standard. So yes, I found these 5 on eBay on a little auction there. It was 99p at the time. With a couple of days to go, I put in a couple of bids. By the end of it, it racked up to £5. Woohoo! Can't really say no to that. So yes, I won. They arrived this morning, and all 5 work. I might actually send the seller a little message on eBay saying, "Thank you very much. They all work perfectly." So yeah. Onto UFS now. With all the file systems. So it shouldn't be much longer now, I think. Yes, I've had all sorts of Unix systems in my time and managed all sorts of Unix. I've managed almost every kind of system you can think of, really, over time. Been in the game so bloomin' long. When I first started using Unix back in university, when we had old fax servers, DEC fax servers running Ultrix and VMS, some of them. So yeah, VMS is a lovely operating system back then. Again, it's all on green screen terminals. We had this called the concourse, which is just a room that was just like a warehouse, just a sea of terminals. Within one corner, a little group of Macintoshes, and in another corner, a little group of PCs. But then also off to one side, there were rooms around the edge, and one of the rooms had deck stations, which were, by comparison, wow, they were phenomenal computers. The size of a desktop PC, about the size of this gateway, maybe a bit smaller, with a monitor on it that was, well, looking back on it, it was a huge monitor. I mean, it would have been about, I suppose, 21 inch, 23 inch perhaps. But they were big, heavy beasts. But they were Unix computers with a graphical display. And after you'd spent months and months and months just using green screen terminals and the odd early Apple Mac for doing a little bit of writing of your essays and things, or Windows 3 on a PC, on a little 386, 486. It blew my mind away, it has to be said, going from green screen terminals to X Windows on big screens. I mean, they were only, what were they? 25 megahertz MIPS computers, so incredibly slow by even by the standards of this 486. It was just a 32-bit MIPS, 25 megahertz, but it was graphics. It was unheard of. There was another lab with Linux computers in there, small PCs running very early version of Linux. And that was just the console. There was no X Windows or anything even on it back then. I don't think X Windows had even been ported to Linux by that stage. So these deck stations were just mind-blowing. I managed to... the course I was on didn't have official access to these resources, but I got chummy with the people the group that managed the deck stations, and managed to wangle an account on them. So I spent all my time on those, and they were lovely machines. But yeah, Ultrix was the first version of Unix that I used on the green screens, that's where I learnt to use Vi as my default editor, and I still use Vi for everything these days. If it's not Vi, I get confused. Whereas most people say if it is Vi, they get confused. So yeah, Vi is the first editor on Unix that I got to grips with. And yeah, we had Pico, which was part of the Pine email client. Pico has been forked and rewritten and redeveloped as Nano, you'll know it as now. It's hardly changed over the decades since I first used it as Pico, but not a patch on Vi. But no, the best editor I've ever used is on VMS, and it's called Eve, the Extensible VAX editor. That was quite a piece of work, that editor. It's 100% text-based, obviously, on green screen terminals, but it's the power of that editor, because it was extensible. It had all sorts of plugins and things for all the different languages. A bit like, I suppose the closest you get to that now would be Emacs, but without the horrible user interface of Emacs. If you think of the simplicity of Nano, or Pico as it was then, coupled with the power of Emacs, you've got Eve. And when I was on VMS, which most of my work was done on VMS, that was the only editor we ever used. Because we had to use that for writing programs in COBOL, for interfacing with old SQL server and all sorts, I think. But no, don't get me started on COBOL. Oh, horrible language. COBOL is the reason why I loathe Python. Because COBOL and Python have one thing in common, which just does my head in, and that is enforced indentation. And COBOL itself is just a horrible language. If you ever get the opportunity to write anything in COBOL, say no. But the language has specific indentations for different things. And Python has indentation for different levels of program flow. And that just links across to COBOL in my mind. And I just go. So I refuse point blank to ever use Python for anything unless I absolutely have to. Which means there are two things that I use Python for. One is working in Blender, which is all written in Python. So you've got to work in Python for that. If you want to write anything script-wise in Blender, it has to be in Python. And the other is my company website is all written in Python. It's an off-the-shelf product that's unfortunately written in Python. So if I want to add extra bits to that, I need to write them in Python. Fortunately, there's very little you need to do in Python to add to it. You can do most of it through the web interface, so I'm happy. So yes, writing COBOL and writing basic programs as well back then as well. There's a lot of basic back then written on the VAX. VAX Basic was an absolutely incredible language. It's... You think of, when you say basic, you think of like the little home computers like the Spectrum or the Commodore 64, those sort of things. 10 print hello, 20 go to 10, that sort of rubbish. But VAX Basic was nothing like that. It was a far more well-rounded and fully fledged language with full sort of database accesses, and it was a proper mature programming language. So much so that I used to write network games in VAX Basic. You know, like you used to have MUDs called. I mean, they're still around now. It's just not very popular. It's basically like a text adventure, but it's multi-user dungeon. MUD MUD. They were all the rage back then. And I used to write my own using VAX Basic on the VAX VMS, using VMS Basic on the VAX VMS servers. And I didn't really know much about inter-process communication or network programming or anything like that back then. So what I had was a monolithic interface program which communicated directly with a database. And the database contained all the data for the world that you're in, and also tables being used for piping of data between the different instances of the clients. It was really quite an ingenious setup, and all written in VMS Basic. It was such a powerful language. We never actually got really taught it at university, unfortunately. Of course, I was taught as COBOL. So I learnt Basic, I learnt C, I learnt Assembly, I learnt and hated COBOL because I taught myself the better languages. So yeah, if there's one thing university taught me, it's how to teach myself things. How are we doing? Oh, we're on to the i386 specific stuff now. System console, syscons. Serial I/O. Can't be much longer now. How long have we been streaming for? Hour and 3/4 we've been going for. That's not bad. What else can I yammer on about? Fill time. Well, not a lot really. And I do have a soft spot for old coaxial BNC networks. base 2, as it's properly known. Because when I had my computer shop, I installed many networks all over the place. I remember I got called in to one local company to install a network in their office. And the reason they gave me for wanting the network was not for file sharing, was not for printer sharing, was not for collaboration, was not for Lotus groupware, was not for anything like that. It was so they could play Doom across the network. That was the sole reason they wanted a network in this office, was so they could play Doom networked. I ask you. Would you believe it? Windows just blue screened. Right, come on, can we get things working again? I am streaming, aren't I? Yes, slowly, as I load up other things. Come on, that one's working. Oh, in the meantime, the kernel has compiled. Windows on this streaming computer has a bit of an issue, and I think it's network related, because it's always TCP/IP.sys that crashes, and it's always driver not less than whatever it is, driver IQL not less than is the error. So I think it's the onboard network card on this motherboard is iffy, or the drivers for it, or it always crashes in the same way. Right, okay, where are we? I've just installed the kernel. So yeah, I want to get a new network card for this computer, I think. I want to get a whole new computer, actually. I'm looking at, this is an old i7 3770. That's what I was going to say K, but no, I ditched the K for the straight one. i7 3770. And I mean, it's a decent enough CPU on there, but it's kind of stretched. So I'm looking at the possibility of upgrading to maybe an 8th gen or 9th gen i7 instead. But of course, that will mean a new motherboard, new memory, new everything. Right, booting up. Do we get to find? We've got, oh yes, we've got ED0, address 4095, blah, 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 type any 2000, 16-bit. Excellent. Oh, excuse me. Hopefully we shall have this booted and working and tested just in time for me to finish streaming at about 9 o'clock. That'd be a good time to leave it, I think. So yeah, I'm on the market for a new streaming computer, I think. Or the insides to a new streaming. I've got nothing against the case. Right. Looking good so far. It's not initializing it, of course. ED0, yep, okay. Let's edit the RC configuration, network configuration subsection. Okay. E0. I have config ED0. 192.168, 130, 160. This computer, I think. Mask. All right. FF. Oh, oh. I can't remember now how we do been a while. Network routing. Default router. 131. Oh, hang on. That's wrong. Not 160, is it? 164. There we go. And it doesn't ping. And it doesn't ping there either. 192, 168, 130, 164, that's right. Is it maybe using... No, it can't be using the wrong interface, because the interface is hard jumpered. Right, okay. It finds the card. It's got the right Ethernet address. I've assigned an internet IP address. It's 192.168.130 is correct. It's up, it's running, it's in simplex mode. It should be right. I'm going to reboot. We're close. We are very close. Working in DOS, but it's not working in BSD. Screw in it, really, shouldn't I? Okay. B20 IQ5, that's what it was on, yes. Come on, hurry up and finish booting. Might be that the port got shut down because of the IP conflict by my Cisco switch. There we go, it's working. We have network connectivity. Ignore that PPP stuff. Before I had network on here, I was using PPP over a serial connection to act as my internet connection on it. And my God, that was slow because it's got a 16550A for the UART. And there's a bug, which means that it can't reliably do high throughput at anything more than 9600. So although I could connect it to my gateway system, my network gateway at 115.200 baud, it couldn't actually do anything once it was connected. So I had to drop it down to 9600, and it worked, but it was so slow it was unusable. So hopefully 10 megabit will be just a little bit quicker. Right, well, that is working. And I am happy with that. I am very happy with that. 5 working ISA network cards for £1 each. Not bad. I've still got this one to dump the memory from. I've got a little program that I've written for DOS that can do that for me. It actually dumps the entirety of the whole address space, or the conventional memory 1 meg address space into a file. So I can just dump the whole thing and then just probe through it and find the ROM without needing to know the address. So yeah, I'll do that later, I think, because it's now getting on towards 9 o'clock. I've got, 5 working network cards. I've got one of them working in BSD. I've got internet connectivity with it. I think I am done. I'm wondering actually if I want to put a sound card in this computer as well. It did have one in originally. It had a Sound Blaster 16 in there. I've got a Yamaha board as well, although I've got a feeling actually that Yamaha board might, yeah. I don't know if you follow Tech Tangents at all on Twitch. I certainly do. Shelby, brilliant bloke. Love him to bits. He streams regularly. You should check him out. I've got a link to him on my recommended channels page. Yeah, he's got these arcade cabinets, Hydro Thunder, these old early 2000s arcade game, boat racing games, which he's been fixing and hacking around and examining the hardware on them and getting it working on standard PC hardware, because it's just a standard PC inside. And the game requires certain hardware to run, including a Voodoo 2 for the graphics, but also a Yamaha sound card. And I've got a hunch this one that I've got might be the same chip on it that's required for that. So I might use that card in my P3 Celeron system, possibly, and see if I can get Hydro Thunder running on it. But I need to get a Voodoo 2 card as well to be able to do that. And it's got a Voodoo 3 card in there at the moment, but unfortunately there's no backwards compatibility. It has to be a Voodoo 2 and at least 12 megabyte. 12 megabyte? 12 meg. Yeah, 12 megabyte. 12 gigabyte? No, that's up in the realm of the RTX 3080 then, isn't it? 12 gig. At least a 12 megabyte Voodoo 2. So I need to look out for one of those as well. And then I can attempt to see if I can get Hydro Thunder arcade version running on it. Build my own arcade cabinet. That would be fun. So yeah, I think that's what I'll save that card for. Yeah, no, I think that's where I'm going to leave it now. It's almost 9 o'clock here. I think I'll need to go and make myself a cup of tea and go and unwind. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. It's been a fun adventure, I think, with very good results. As I say, check out Tech Tangents. He streams usually Friday, Saturday, Sunday at the same time, early evening in the UK. And I will see you, well, I might see you Thursday. Because as I say, I've got this new toy of mine coming tomorrow, and I'm thinking I will spend most of Thursday playing with it. And I'm going to do all of it, if I can, on stream live. So I'm probably going to be streaming all day Thursday, or on and off Thursday. So yeah, keep an eye out on Twitch, because I'm probably going to be popping up on Thursday during the day and in the evening with my new toy. All I will say is it has 8-bit ISA slots. I don't know what it is yet. I've been promised it. I'm supposed to be getting it tomorrow evening. So long as I do, I'm pretty sure by its description, I'm going to be very excited by it, and hopefully so will you. So we shall find out on Thursday if it's what I hope it is, and if it is, whether I can get it going. And whether we can then have some fun with it. So until Thursday, thank you all for being with me. It's been great. I've had fun. I don't know if you have or not. But see you Thursday, I hope.